Hey, what's up, guys? This is Dallin.
And this is Silas.
And this is Word
on
the
Street.
Woo! What's up, my peoples? What's going down? This is Word on the Street. I'm your host, the Zim of the Zim and A-Rock. And this is version 136 of the podcast with Justin Froese. And we'll get to that in a minute, because every week, as you know, I do an intro. And this is my intro. This is where I get to talk to you. This is what I say. I've been saying for the last few weeks. This is my favorite part of the podcast. You know, I love doing the whole thing, but I definitely love to talk to you. I love to catch up with you. I love to let you know what's going on with me, with the podcast, with the band. Just a little snippets, never more than 10 minutes. I never go over 10 minutes. And since the podcast is, comes in usually around an hour and 20, 30 minutes, 10 minutes is not that much to sit through if you want to. Otherwise, you can always just fast forward. I know on most podcast players, depending on where you're listening to it, depends on how you can fast forward it. But there are ways to skip ahead to the conversation. If you want to get right into it, you can feel free to do that. Otherwise, hang out with me for a minute. I'd love to talk with you. And I'd love it if you were here to talk with me. This is my second time doing this intro because I just ate something. And I was like smacking my mouth around too much the first time, and I would listen back to it. I was like, that sounds terrible. Hopefully I won't be smacking as much. So we'll do it. So this is the main thing I need to tell you right now is we're up against it, and this is it. This is the one right here, because after publishing this podcast, number 136, I don't have any more in the can, as they say. There's none left for me to publish after that. So that's why I'm going to Seattle next week. June 7th, I get on an airplane and fly to Seattle. And I'll be getting I have 13 podcasts scheduled to record while I'm in Seattle. And then, we'll see. Well, hopefully that'll happen. Maybe I'll get a couple more. Maybe some of them will cancel. You know how it works. Life happens all the time. It's happening right now. Life is happening right now. So somewhere around 13 I'll be recording. And hopefully the first one I have scheduled is on the 7th when I land. So if that one works out, then that one will be published on the 8th as my next drop of the podcast. If that doesn't work out, I'm going to probably have something I'll probably prep something, probably a WOTS radio, and maybe another interview. There is a potential to get one more interview in San Diego of the Seattle conversation with a touring band. So we'll see if that happens. But there's a couple ways around this, but essentially, I don't know what's going to happen. It's a mystery. We'll find out together, you and me. So stay tuned for that. But as I said, I'll be in Seattle, and there's a whole bunch that I'm going to be doing in Seattle, recording a bunch of podcasts, as I said. But then the other thing is just going out and supporting the community and being in the community. I'll have my camera with me, so I'll be taking videos and maybe photos. I don't have a good lens for photo taking anymore. The one I use just for video, it's the same camera. It does video and photo. The one I use for video works for video, but sucks for photo taking. And my good lens I still haven't been able to fix. If you remember back many months ago when I basically first moved to San Diego, I dropped my camera and dented my lens so it won't focus anymore. But I haven't taken it to the shop yet to get fixed because I haven't wanted to. I just haven't felt like I've had the flexibility in my budget to make that happen. So I'll just be taking video for sure, and maybe photo if I decide to get this lens fixed, but I'm running out of time. I was considering renting a lens and seeing if that would work out. But anyways, so there's that. I'll be at the shows. And I'm going to 4 shows that I know of right now. They are in order. June 8th is Numo's going to be Eric Blood and Season of Strangers. June 9th, Substation is going to be Year of the Cobra, Stereo Creeps, and Moss Generator. June 10th, the 10 Miles Wide tour kickoff show. I was about to say like EP release show, but that's not correct. Tour kickoff show, 10 Miles Wide with Oswald Effect, Omni, and Upwell. So that's going to be rocking at the High Dive. Did I say that? I think I said that. And then June 15th is going to be Heather Thomas, Whitney Manger, and the Black Tones for Heather Thomas's album release show. That's at the Tractor Tavern. That's going to be awesome. They're all going to be awesome. I'm stoked. So I'll be getting lots of video and posting them. I usually post right away when I take videos and photos usually. So look out for those on the Word on the Street Facebook page mostly, and then the YouTube channel for the videos, youtube.com/thezimvideo. Check that out. But and then of course I have to mention, it would be just wrong of me not to mention that I'm playing a show June 11th at the High Dive with the Zim and A-Rock. We're headlining a show with Miss C and Morning Glory Revival. So good, lots and lots of good music. I'm super stoked to be back in Seattle. Looking forward to it, and super stoked to see some friends, see some friendly faces that I know. Super stoked for all of it. Just stoked. And then I'm also super stoked for a little mini vacation because I've been working hardcore down here in San Diego, and it's just I need a break a little bit. Even though, as you just heard me say, I'm going to be doing a lot while I'm in Seattle, but it will be less than what I do in San Diego in terms of my daily grind that I do, trying to make monies. But is what it is. But I'm a little bit anxious because I'm missing out on a little bit more than a week of work while I'm in Seattle. So hopefully I'll be able to pay rent in July because of the time off I'm taking in June. I will be able to, I'm sure, but it'll just be harder to make the ends meets. But that's what's going on. I do want to mention this conversation with Justin Froese. So at the very beginning of it, I haven't listened back to the whole thing yet, but I did listen back to the beginning. I mentioned something, and I've mentioned back in the past on my video journals and maybe at the top of one of these intros before that, I'm planning to do a second kind of branch of the podcast. I want to do more in general with the podcast, and one of those things is do a San Diego part of it, not, and have it be a separate kind of feed than this Word on the Street Seattle conversation. And I thought for a moment that this podcast that we did today would be the kind of start of that, because Justin Froese is in San Diego right now, Southern California and stuff, but also has spent time in Seattle. So the conversation works for both, and that's why I was going to double dip on this one. But I just haven't had the time to make it happen because of all the stuff I just mentioned with trying to make money, trying to work, doing the Lyft stuff I do. So the resources and time are not abundant for me to do any more with what I'm doing. So I haven't done it yet. So we'll see if it does happen. I hope it does happen, but I just wanted to do a little correction in a sense before we get started. But let's get to this conversation. One last thing to mention is if you want to be a part of this with me, if you want to partner up, if you want to be on this team, if you want to join me in forces and help me move this thing forward together with you, patreon.com/thezim, THEZIM is the URL for the Patreon page. There's also facebook.com/Word on the Street podcast. You can share that and like it and do all the Facebook stuff, and then go to iTunes. iTunes is where podcasts happen. So hook it up, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. WOTSpodcast.com is where you can find the links to everything. So let's talk to Justin Froese right here on the podcast, 136. All right, let's do this. Justin, what's up, dude? How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Justin Froese.
That's right.
I did it right.
Yep.
Check that out. Spell it for me, though.
Froese.
Cool.
Yeah. So, but I always love the interpretations people come up with, Froese, Froese, Froche.
I don't remember. Well, anyways, I did contact the CPA you recommended.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't remember how I said your last name to him, but I don't think it was Froese.
But I think what happens is people know the name, though they don't know exactly how to say it. They recognize a mispronunciation. Go, oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah. So I just want to do a little I don't know, a thing about how we met.
Yeah.
And what's going on. Like, this is like, so this is Word on the Street, obviously,
Yeah.
the podcast. However, you live in like, when I say live, you live in the world of Seattle and San Diego conversation, because you've been in both places now.
Yeah, and somewhat LA still.
Still LA,
Yeah.
okay.
Not as much Austin, even though
Okay.
I lived there for like 6 months, but I don't feel as connected still to that.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Well, in context of Word on the Street, because Word
Yeah.
on the Street is a Seattle-focused conversation.
Oh, cool.
And then also now it's blooming into a San Diego branch as
Naturally,
well. So
yeah.
what I didn't tell you is I think I'm going to double dip with this podcast that we're recording.
Yeah.
Because I'm starting a new feed that's going to be a San Diego feed
Cool.
as well.
Awesome.
So I think you're going to be like the primer episode for the San Diego
Cool.
conversation. So
Hell yeah.
we can get into like all that good stuff
Cool.
about that. And what I was saying before though, is how we met.
Yeah.
So you played a show for you opened or whatever for Susie's Son, and then normally like in Seattle you were in the middle slot. See, that's the headliner slot.
Right.
So you were kind of the headliner in my perspective, right?
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
I'm
yeah.
just teasing. I'm just
No, but yeah, it's like each scene that's kind of different.
yeah.
Like the headline, deadline, or slot. You know, people are like,
Deadline.
they're like, oh no, not a headline slot. Right.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So the things that I like to do off the top of the podcast kind of here is just do like this bullet point kind of idea, and I kind of touched on some of them, and you mentioned it, just where you're from, and it's kind of something we can talk about. One thing that I'm really interested in is asking you about the difference between the scenes, you know, especially like what it's like in Seattle versus what it's like here, and how much time you spend in each one of them. We could talk about you have one of your recordings. Is it fairly new then?
This guy Fireflies is my most recent one, and I'm sort of kind of riding it out.
Okay.
Pretty far. I released it at the end of 2014.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then life happened, and
Sure.
we'll get into that.
Okay.
And now it's 2017,
Okay.
early, and I'm just releasing the vinyl version of it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, well, we can talk about the philosophy around that and
Sure.
why the big gap between releases and things like that.
Sure.
That's awesome. Is there anything else possible that we might get into that you want to bring to the conversation?
Boy,
I have my default questions like why do you play music and all that kind of good stuff. But
Yeah.
if there's anything in particular like you want someone out there to know, we should make sure we sprinkle it in. You can think about it as we go.
I think it'll come up naturally. It'll
Yeah.
be like a branch that just shoots off of something we talk about. Yeah.
Sure. One thing, so I want to set this up with your voice of saying, like, kind of like, give us a state of the Justin, where you're at in your career right now. What are you doing? What's the most current kind of place you're existing in your career? What are you trying to do right now? Like, what's the thing?
Cool. State of the Justin address.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone.
Yeah.
Today. Thank you for joining. Yeah, man, that's a great question. That kind of feels like something which one should ask themselves in the morning every day. State of Justin currently is resuming some promotions with this most recent album, Fireflies. And I'd say also integrating some recent experiences of like the last 11 months. I kind of spent the last 11 months on the road in various ways, or basically without a house.
Okay. Was it for music related, or was it just?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was mostly music related.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, a handful of tours and some other little adventures. So integrating those life experiences, because I think as artists we're always filtering the world around us into art. We're distilling it, we're reflecting it, we're observing and offering insights on it. And so I've done some living recently and trying to figure out where that puts me, because it's all been sort of in consort with this growing desire to, I guess honestly more deeply and truly be myself and my own artist, right? Because as we go, okay, like what's the world that's happening? How are things done? You know, here's this singer-songwriter box, here's this rock band box, here's these things, here's people that are, you know, putting a triangle on their box, that's cool, and breaking out and doing their own thing. And I think for a while, a good long while, I was trying to play by the rules, you know?
Okay. That's a great question. That's a great thing to explore. Like, what rules? Like life rules, music rules? What rules are we talking about? It's a good segue into a question that I kind of ask. So when I'm talking to Seattle musicians, one of the things I ask them is how they fit within the Seattle music scene, right?
Yeah.
How do they feel like, because there's so much diversity, there's so much going on up there that, you know, one band, there's like one band of this, or two bands of the same genre, exact same genre, could have totally different life courses, right?
Yeah.
One could be full of stay-at-home dads, and one could be all rock stars ready to take over the world.
Yeah.
So it's like, so those are those kind of things. So it's like finding out the rules of like what it is Justin wants to do or play, and like that kind of is a similar. There's a similar question there for you. It's like, where do you see you fit within your musical career, like a career as a musician, in terms of, and then maybe that connects to the rules that you were thinking of and how to change them or break them or whatever.
That's a cool way of framing it. Like, where do I see myself fitting, you know, in the music industry in general, in the arts industry in general, and even just in the Justin industry. And I think one thing that's been really beneficial, really enriching and interesting is that I've kind of had the ability to fit in a lot of places.
Okay.
And so that's made the discovery of my art pretty broad, you know, from, you know, playing classical guitar gigs, and duos and quartets, and then doing a little bit of jazz stuff, and then the rock kind of stuff, and even progressive rock or like math rock, you know, with a bunch of counting and and stuff like that, and just doing whatever weird thing you want to do, to the singer-songwriter kind of thing. And so,
and that's kind of the context I know you best as, because that's the only time I've seen you play,
right,
is as a singer-songwriter. So that's okay. That's cool. So what the question that just in you saying that inspired me to ask is like, where does your heart call you in those little pathways? Like, that's pretty wide places to play. Like, and are you one that like, and maybe it's you can't decide, you just like to dabble in lots of things, but is there some pathway there that's really like, I'd really like to do this more or something?
Yeah, that's cool. I kind of hear a few things in there, like what calls me the most, and then also among all those things, what's the common denominator?
Sure, yeah.
You know, and the easy answer is me.
Yeah.
but I think what I've discovered about myself is that I enjoy adapting, you know, and I enjoy variety, and I enjoy like even on this release Fireflies, there's so much variety. And at the time, you know, in assembling the track list and the order of songs and all this, you know, it all made sense to me. And then now with perspective, I'm like, oh man, this fucking shit's random. like this is 3 different albums here, you know,
okay.
You know, in a way, I mean, but that's again, you know, right, with the idea of cohesion and unity in the presentation of your art, right? And so I think in that way too, I'm still exploring, you know, how do I want to present it that makes sense to me and feels whole, but also makes sense to other people? Because I think as an artist, you know, living in a world and sharing your art, you have to ride that line of like, this makes sense to me and I love this, but, you know, does it land on people? Does it click for them like it does for me? Yeah. You know? And so perspective's been great on that. I think, you know, besides the variety I'm drawn to and adapting and applying myself, you know, also like the challenge of it, you know, growing up in my teens, I got into a lot of rock climbing. Okay. And that, you know, permutated to building climbing and tree climbing and all sorts of things. And so there was something very alluring to me about the challenge of something that hadn't been done and that I didn't know I could do. And so I think some of that drives me, and I, feel like I have yet to really harness it in a cohesive way. But also, without being down on myself and giving credit to myself, like, basically I'm excited to explore all sorts of things.
Sure.
Like a kind of more bluesy Beatles thing on here, or a more singer-songwriter Americana thing, or like more like electronic kind of.
Yeah. So does the excitement of exploration outweigh the burden of going too many directions, possibly? Or like feeling like you're spreading too thin kind of idea?
I think in some way, not outweigh, but I think in some way the excitement to explore, not outweighed, but sort of, I don't want to say blinded me, but just got me, wide-eyed and like looking all over. And that's an interesting thing too, is like kind of the time frame and windows within which we allow ourselves to conceive our art and deliver it. It's like you have to use the limitation of time,
sure,
but also with the more time you have, the more you see. Right? So
I get you. I'm
right
there.
Yeah.
Right there with you.
So where I'm at now, too, is wanting to integrate, I guess, all these insights and observations and reflections on my path thus far. And because, courage can be an evolutionary thing and also a revolutionary thing. Yeah. It could just like blow all out in one night, or it could, be this thing you build with momentum. And I guess I'm wanting to still strike a balance of both, because I think as artists, it's important to surprise ourselves if we can, right? Yeah. Because usually we fall into these same tastes and patterns and things, go-tos, defaults. And so, but even right there, see, that's like this like openness to variety and all these things, yet at the same time is this like deep growing desire to know what's truest to me of all these options and avenues, and so I've been discovering more about that.
Cool. Yeah, this whole path of conversation is something that I've been dealing with in a lot of ways myself, in terms of, and maybe this is why I'm talking about it or asking the questions, because it's like lately I've been thinking about like I've heard this idea, like you pick one thing and go all in on it and just double down your strengths kind of, and like just really know who you are and just go for it and find that one thing, that one thing. I was kind of locked into this one thing idea for a while, but then I realized for myself that just didn't resonate right, because even if you look in the room we're sitting in the Studio 1200 here, I got my sewing machine, I have my music stuff,
saxophone,
I have, other art related stuff all around me,
some rad like classic vintage toys, Transformers. Yeah, totally.
And what I realized was that I didn't want to pick one thing. I wanted to just keep doing multiple things, like record a podcast, be in a band, create a product, do different things. And so it like really like helped me keep moving forward and not feel the burden of saying, oh, I need to pick the one thing. And I'm kind of sensing that similar kind of thing from you, where it's like you haven't yet, or if you have, you haven't expressed it yet to me, that you've tried to go down the one thing path and decided maybe it's not the thing for you, or you're just still in this discovery place of like, I just want to really just keep exploring musical styles and musical ways in all the little musical things that I do.
Yeah, I'm not positive I've chosen the one thing yet, and I have some hunches about what that one thing is. And I think, along those lines, I often find myself sharing with friends when they share that they're struggling to know what to do and what to pick out of things. I often find myself naturally impelled to say, I think we always know our answer and we know it right away. But what we go through as not knowing and being on the fence and all this and that is just us struggling to accept what that one thing is. Because to recognize it's the one thing and then move ahead in that is not easy.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned earlier a few minutes ago in the conversation about your album, we were talking a little bit about Fireflies.
Yeah.
That's what it's called.
Yeah.
You said how it lands on people. And that's often a really strong vehicle for how we create our course, is the reaction we get from people from what we do. So it's like through this course, through those different styles that you mentioned you like to do, the classical, the jazz, the singer-songwriter, the rock, it's like, have you felt things land better on people than other styles, maybe in contradiction to what you personally want to be doing in the moment or anything like that? Like, has the audience help guide you decide what you want to do next or in the moment or anything like that? Have you felt that yet or have? Or
Yeah, definitely. And because there's variety on this album, I've gotten a variety of favorites from people, you know.
Sure, yeah.
Some people go, "Oh my God, this is my favorite." I'm like, "Cool." And then others like, "This one." I'm like, "Yeah, that makes sense." You know, like there's a track Finally Here on here that's the single, and it's originally I wrote it with my cousin Nancy Montgomery in Nashville, and that was a cool story where we had really only met maybe 3 times in life. She's my first cousin, my mom's cousin. And so when we met and decided we want to write some songs, because my parents had shared with her some of what I was doing with my career, and she was excited, and she had some hits in the 80s in top 10 Billboard country. And cool. Yeah, and so she reached out to me to write, and so we just got together and wrote and decided we wanted to write something about home and coming home, and that we also wanted to try to write something for the Lumineers. And so this song kind of came out of, I think that desire, and then just making the space for it to come through, and us both being, pretty vigilant about our muse, and this song is like, just came right through, like super easy, not a lot of struggle, and it's gotten the most enthusiastic response of any song I've ever done.
Sure.
Widespread. It's actually won some international songwriting contests.
Cool.
It's just been this thing that's just went boom, and I'm like, whoa. And God, it's so funny because it's sort of case in point. The way it was written and the time frame in which it was written, being very short and narrow. And then, she was like, all right, I want to pitch this to some people. Can you make a demo?
Yeah.
Like, we have to do it by Monday. I'm like, it was like Friday. I'm like, okay, I'll just dive in.
Yeah.
And I made the whole track in 3 days straight. And it's like more than a demo.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm like, that's part of my nature too, is like, once I get in something, I love it. And I just find all the things you could do with it and build it out. And in recording and completing a track, because I've self-produced a lot and produced for other artists, getting it all done within 3 days is pretty exceptional. Yeah. And I even went back, I'm like, I think I can make this better, you know, and I tried to tinker and stuff, and nothing clicked, and it actually sounded worse. I'm like, fuck, it's done, isn't it? Yeah. This is... And that was such an interesting experience of myself, to be like, okay, there's this little window where the way in which you work and what you work with comes very naturally, and then it's done. And you don't have to labor too much on it, because that, I think, becomes unnatural. Yeah. And...
Well, this going down this track of, like, workflow and how you write and things like that, have you discovered preferred methods, like how you like to write? Like you said, you insinuated in the sense that the short time frame was a little bit of a burden, yet it created something great out of it. So it was like, okay, there was a struggle, but it created something great. Is there a preferred, like, if somebody came to you and said, Justin, I need you to write a song, about this or whatever, what would be your preferred time frame to work with, or can you even put a time frame on it?
Well, yeah, I mean, my preferred time frame is like, let's sit down right now and push and finish it.
Okay.
Let's do our very best. Let's give ourselves an hour.
Yeah.
And if it's going well and we're on track, we'll give ourselves a little more time, but let's knock it out.
Yeah.
Because if you come out of the moment and the flow, the energy, whatever you're in contact with, and then you try to access it again another day, you can do it, but I just think it's easier to get it all in one shot. And so my preferred method for, writing and recording is kind of like this limited window where you give your best and give your all in this short time frame, but you don't allow yourself mentally sort of this like out, like, well, I'll work on it next week, or I've got like 4 free weekends this month. And you're like, oh shit, well now this is going to take a month.
Yeah.
I think too, one key thing that I've been realizing is that as artists, I think we have to be willing to struggle, and we have to be willing to. You kind of said burden. You were speaking to like I think a lot of things, but we have to let ourselves be a little pushed and burdened, because in that space, like all the fluffy bullshit we would want to bring to it, like there's no room for it.
Yeah.
It's just pure instincts.
Yeah.
And that was that weekend for me of recording those 3 days. It was like only room for pure instincts.
Yeah.
Like what's essential here? Okay, do it, track it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, next. But I think too, in terms of having, to sort of tie back one thing from earlier, you said about, having the feedback of other people as we go, and that kind of influencing our path. I think it's very important to have what I call a hall of mirrors. People that are with you at the beginning of something, people that are with you in the middle, and people that are with you at the end, that as you're doing it, you can show it to them and you can count on them for the feedback you need, And so that may be other writers up front, or just pure fans, like, oh, I love it, it's catchy, I'm playing it all the time, on my iPod or whatever, iPad, or what do we have now? We don't even have iPods anymore.
I do.
You do?
Yeah. I'm an iPod. I use my iPod.
Cool.
All the time.
I have one, but I gave it to a friend, and I don't think I'm ever getting it back. And then at the end, of that hall, engineers, producers, people that can go, it's a little bright, it's a little harsh, it's a little too full. Because in my experience of producing other artists and sort of painfully growing with myself, I've realized that artists are sort of blindsided to themselves. It's hard to really see yourself in a clear light.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, right.
So true. I see it in myself, obviously, but then I also see it in others as well. It's like, oh man, if only. And I wish, and sometimes it's hard. It's hard to know if you really want the truth out of people, but at the same time, I know I want them to be brutally honest. Like, tell me, just be brutally honest. Tell me what you think about this, what I'm working on. But at the same time, you kind of have to take all that with a grain of salt and just go like, if it speaks to you personally, if you feel good about it, then just go for it,
Yeah, and that's sort of been simmering to the top for me in this conversation with you now too, is just that it seems unavoidable and inevitable that as an artist, you're gonna have to find a way to live and thrive and survive in this space where you stay completely true to yourself, but you also listen to and acknowledge other people.
Yeah.
And so in that way, there's no right answer. It's not, just listen to yourself. Fuck everyone.
Yeah.
Nope.
Well, that ties into something I talk about all the time, where it's very important. I believe it's super important to know your influences. It's like to have influence, have inspiration, and let that flow through you, and don't try to be like, I don't have any influence, I just create. It's like,
I'm original.
Yeah, I'm so original.
Yeah, bullshit.
But it's a similar kind of thing where if you listen to the people around you that you trust and they give you feedback and advice, maybe it's be wise to every once in a while, like really at least reflect on it and go like, what are they trying to tell me? And then what can I do with it, you know?
Yeah, man. And that's like, I don't know, I've gotten so many comparisons. Ben Harper, which is cool, but I honestly haven't listened to more than, I don't know, 5 tracks. Jeff Buckley, which I'm very proud of, but that maybe only be on a couple tracks.
Sure.
Ray LaMontagne. But then in terms of knowing my influences, you know, I grew up with my dad. He played music and he taught me. He was like my inspiration to play. I started when I was 5, and he was playing folk guitar and playing stuff like Crosby, Stills and Nash, Cat Stevens, the Beatles, Jim Croce, John Denver, this kind of like folky, you know, 60s and 70s kind of stuff. And so Cat Stevens became hugely influential on me, because I felt like he could like run a variety of sounds and styles, but it all sounded like him. You know? And then Paul Simon was a huge one, and he did the same thing. He explored all these sounds and timbres and styles, and it still sounded like him, you know? So, knowing those influences. And then even too, you know, I wonder sometimes, man, but if you have too many, what's that going to amount to? Like eventually, it does seem like in life and the life of an artist, there's this thing of pick one. And I want to come back to that, because you kind of said that. And I think you could probably relate. There's sort of this inside, this like pick one, like, right? And that happens, you know, with like, you know, pick one career, or pick one thing to work on now, or pick one poem to finish, or pick one partner to work on relating and communicating with, or, you know, it's like, that doesn't mean that'll be the one forever. But there's something about choosing that engages something in you that's useful to that means and end. And so again, like that, it's just, for me, it's always comes back to like these two extremes, and how can you just like ride in the middle, not neglect either, but like be in the middle. And so I have some artist friends that like their careers have really taken off in a huge way, and I listen to their music and I go, wow, it kind of sounds like a rip off of this and this with their voice in it. And I admit, you know, I've to much of my frustration and even jealousy, I'm like, well, I could fucking rip off 2 different people, and you know, but that's not what feels true to my heart, you know. And so that happens too, is like we see this success of, you know, our peers, and we kind of go, oh, like, what am I doing wrong?
Well, the other problem with that idea is like we look at success, external success, right? We look at somebody that's, like the example you just described, but it's like what the term that came to mind is this, like the cocktail of a success that they mixed may not, even if you took the same ingredients and added you to that cocktail, it may not hit, you know? So it's like, how do you it's like knowing, that's the whole mystery of success, right? That's the whole mystery of, well, success in terms of, I don't know, there's a lot of definitions of success, but like like making a hitting externally with a greater community, and going like, what is it that resonated with this greater community, and how do I do that myself, you know? And it's like hard to know, because even if you think like you just described, well, they just took 2 styles and did that, and then why don't I just do that? But it may not work because it's a different cocktail.
Exactly. But I think too, I'm coming to suspect, and that there are essentially maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 basic design elements that need to come together. And when it's too many, right, we're like, what is this? Who is this person? Well, right? And it's just sort of like the laws of design, like the rule of thirds. It's like 3 of something is so strong, right? But once you have 4, for some reason, for the human mind, it's a little too much to track, right? And then it gets into, okay, well, this isn't widespread pop
Yeah.
mainstream commercial music, now this begins to get a little more arty, and it's for those that are whatever, more into that stuff. So I think there is something to like, all right, pick 3.
Yeah.
And pick 1.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like there's definitely truth to the idea that people, the general public or whatever, general listener wants to be able to relate to it in some way. Like they want to recognize it in some way. And then the people that kind of break out are the ones that give you something recognizable but change it just enough, make it their own just enough, so then it's it becomes a new thing, So it's a tricky.
Well, and I think something you said in there is absolutely key as social group creatures, right? Because we're not living in a void or alone, even though we feel very much that way. We're plagued by that. Yeah. But it's that people have to see themselves in what you do. And if they don't see themselves in it, then it's not going to hit them. Yeah. It's not going to stick with them. There's like that sticky factor. And if they can relate to it and feel with it, if it could be so relatable that they almost feel understood simply by listening to it, I think what that does for the human psyche and the human heart is the most powerful thing, right? Because that's those things that bind us together, like mother and child, or like family, or and so I think it has to have that appeal. And if the presentation of the ideas in that are being offered to relate to are too complex and convoluted, then yeah, we don't connect as deeply.
There's a question there about how you write in terms of where do you bring your story, the stories that you write from, but I want to hold that thought.
Cool.
Because we're over halfway now.
Okay.
So let's drop in some music. We need to get some music in here. So
hell yeah.
What song off of Fireflies do we want to put in?
Well, let's listen to that one I was chatting about. It's called Finally Here.
Finally Here. Okay. And you kind of already gave us kind of a synopsis of how it came about and things. So is there anything you wanted to add to it?
Just that every time I play it, I think of my cousin. She had kind of been ill at the time, and it wasn't until maybe a month or two after we wrote it that she finally got the diagnosis. She had stage 4 cancer.
Oh, wow. And
then, kind of began a decline and went some months after that. And so, yeah, it has this like joyous thing, but for me, it also has this not bittersweet, but like, just like, damn, that's the realness of life.
Yeah.
So
let's listen to Fireflies, or off of Fireflies, Finally Here by Justin Froese. And what's your cousin's name?
Nancy Montgomery.
Nancy Montgomery.
Miles and miles and miles of highway, trials and trials have been my path, pressing on with no direction through the fire, the smoke and ash. Tears, my tears have rained with sorrow, cursed each day with every breath. Here I stand with new tomorrows. I've been lost but found at last. And the heavens say yeah, and the preacher says amen, and the angels say where all the hell have you been? With arms wide open, we'll all be there. Welcome home, you're finally here. Piece by piece I started over, step by step I made my way. All you said was just keep going, don't give up, it's not too late. And the heavens say yeah, and the preacher says amen, and the angels say where all the hell have you been? With arms wide open, we'll all be there. Welcome home, you're finally here. unsaved. Words unspoken made me whole. Amazing grace. Now here I am, my song I'm singing. Raise my voice for all to hear. Your sweet, sweet love, my sweet redemption. I can hear you loud and clear. And then I say, yeah. And the preacher said, amen. And the angel said, where the hell have you been? And the heaven said, yeah. And the preacher said, amen. And the angel said, where the hell have you been? With arms wide open, we'll all be there. Welcome home, you're finally here. With arms wide open, we'll all be there. Welcome home, you're finally here.
Just a quick reminder, you can become a partner to the Word on the Street podcast. Go to patreon.com/thezim, $1 or more, and you and I will be partners together in this adventure. Also go to facebook.com/Word on the Street podcast. Give the page a like, share it around with your friends. And then also iTunes, go find it, rate, review, and subscribe. And you can find all the links to this on WOTSpodcast.com. All right, let's get back with Justin Froese. All right, so before the song, just keep going. Before the song, you mentioned that idea of like bringing, when you think of the song, that it reminds you of your cousin, right? Mm-hmm. Does that happen? Like that happens for me all the time. Is that like, do most of your songs put you back in a place of where you wrote them, or a memory of what happened, or some kind of thing like that with the music that you write and perform?
Yeah, I mean, the memories are definitely encoded in the musical information, and so and I've always been pretty like, I don't know, cinematic or visual in my mind. Mm-hmm. So the scene pops on the screen, so to say. Yeah. Whether I dive deeply into that, or I just sort of say, well, this song is about longing to connect one more time with someone that you've broken up with. I may not think of the original memory. I may just approximate that feeling and be in it.
Is there anything you can't play because of a association? Things that you put on the shelf, like I just can't do that one anymore. This actually leads into the other question I had before the song, which is I'll bring it into this part of the conversation right now, is like, where do you write from? Like we were talking a little bit about just how people relate to your songs, right? And how people can relate to music in general. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've found is, if you're honest with what the message, if it's true for you and as true as you can make it, it'll be true for someone else as well. They'll find an interpretation of it that really relates to them. But then I know there's lots of songwriters who write like third person or whatever. They write like a story that they don't necessarily have experience, but they just write it as a story. But how do you where do you approach that writing? Because the way there's a lot here. I'll just leave. Well, the way it relates to the songs that maybe you can't sing anymore. Like for myself, I write very autobiographical, and it's like sometimes there's an idea that I don't want to live into anymore, so I stop singing about that idea or talking about that idea. I just want to move past it or whatever. But anyways, there's a little mix of ideas.
I follow. I don't think there are any songs of mine that I don't play anymore because I don't want to reconnect to the memory of them. Yeah. There are some songs I don't play anymore because I'm like, that's just a shit song. Yeah. And if no one requests it, cool. Yeah. In terms of where I write from, I mean, my firsthand experience is, undoubtedly the most potent to me. And so when something comes from there, it has like a depth to it. I don't know if people can tell the difference between that and otherwise, but I think it's something unique to artists, but I happen to feel very empathically or very empathetically to people. So, and part of my like personal history and story is that I've always been, quiet and introverted and observant and not directly involved in the middle of things, but kind of on the outside looking in. And so, a lot of practice of observation skills. And in that, my awareness of situations and the dynamics and the communication and the emotional threads between people, it's all become pretty vivid to my perception. So I could just be in a coffee shop and just pick up on something. It's like a little snag gets my attention. I'm like, what's that? And I just look and I get this impression of like this exchange. And I guess, not all of those convert to songs or to creative ideas, but when they do, I'm just sort of relating and then the song then doesn't have to follow closely exactly what those people are experiencing. It can sort of be a springboard, but no matter what, when I move forward with it, I try to make sure that there's some cohesion in there. That's just not a bunch of random emotions. And also in terms of more on the way I write, like I really like, I guess, in some way I'm a traditionalist in some way. I really like the verse to set a tone, set the stage, tell a story, give an impression. And I really love the chorus to sum something up, to make an observation about the whole thing, and an observation that has the most impact and is kind of like the takeaway. And I recognize it's very traditional, but I think I really like that delivery system because we're very story-driven creatures, and we like a little bit of context, and then we're also always like, and what's the point?
Yeah, totally. I want to kind of shift gears a little bit here, because I'm very curious about, and this is kind of like I mentioned at the top, the whole relationship of scenes that we're involved with. And you're in the San Diego mainly. You're living in San Diego, right?
Yeah.
Now, and you're doing that thing. Here, how much time did you spend in Seattle?
3 years living
in Seattle.
Yeah.
And so you got to experience some of that culture and scene and stuff. So normally this is like I'm going to ask the same question, but I want you to answer it from both perspectives. Okay. Basically, it's just when I say, let's start with San Diego. When I say San Diego music scene, what comes to mind? What is it about? What is the San Diego music scene, or what is, from your perspective, what have you experienced in this area?
When I think of the San Diego music scene, and just as a disclaimer, like my perspective is super limited. Even though I grew up here, I feel like my head's been out of it for a long time. So I don't know all that's going on, but
that's not, just for my what's important to me is not important to know what's all going on. It's only important to know how you're relating to it.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. One, perhaps, I gave that disclaimer because I would say the San Diego music scene to me is kind of like sun drunk, laid back, have a good time, like be hip and in, and just party, and beachy, and kind of, for some reason, the beach is associated with reggae. I don't know why. And so a lot of singer-songwriters, some indie pop bands. There is a jazz scene here. I felt like I got a more vivid impression of the jazz in Seattle than I did here, and we can go into that.
When you're playing, like, how do you personally access music down here in terms of performance? Like, what do you tend to do more often, or what has been the shows that you, because like we said already, I saw you just do a solo set, singer-songwriter oriented. what do you do mostly when you're looking for gigs or whatever since you've been here?
I've kind of done part band
Okay.
and part solo, but really for a while now it's been mostly solo. I do live looping when I play, and I really like the dynamic of playing solo or stripped down. I feel like it's where my voice and my sort of sense of time and space created with sound really shines the most. I've yet to feel like with a band I can harness that. It's like I'd rather even call it an ensemble than a band, and that's maybe my classical background.
Sure.
It's like, all right, let's be all together, dynamic, expressive, like not just like not just like everyone play loud and hard. So I've mostly been playing solo, and I'm kind of nervous and excited. I have a show coming up April 12th at the Belly Up. That'll be full band, and I'm both nervous and excited because it's fun to come back to that after so much solo, and be like, all right, how can I reapproach this now in a way that works for me and my voice still shines.
And so when you perform in a band and solo, I suppose, well, what is the makeup of your set, and what is the set length usually? Like when you play, are you play within a group of other bands like when I saw you at the Soda Bar, or do you play solo where you play all night by yourself? Like what is your typical like kind of show?
Yeah. When playing solo, it's usually 45 minutes to 60 minutes. And I like to mix up the looping and the non-looping stuff. And then with the band, the same 45 to an hour. And usually somewhere in the middle there, I like to strip it down to a few instruments or just me and kind of build it up. I love a show, a performance that's like a journey and has like a cool arc to it.
So so in that, it's telling me that most of the material is original, kind of like, and it's more, like your show, it's original music. Is there a good access in this local San Diego place for original music versus maybe other styles or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of venues for original music, and then there's lots where you could, kind of do a mix of covers and originals, and probably play longer than an hour set, and actually do a fair amount of those. And I've kind of like, they're bread and butter gigs, They I mean, I artistically express myself there, but it's just, there's a difference in performing to an audience that's there to listen and performing for an audience that's just looking for some background vibe, So, I mean, sometimes I play a 3 or 4 hour gig. And, sometimes 4 of those a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What does that do for you in terms of, does that fulfill you artistically, or is it just like to make money, or is like, how does it live within you when you know you're going to play one of those kind of sets, like a long set where people aren't going to be listening as intently or whatever?
I mean, it's been such a freaking journey because on the one hand, when you play hours and hours and it feels like no one's listening or appreciating, it's easy to get bummed out and be like, what am I, chopped liver? What am I, like a fixture of affluence or a glorified jukebox, And in those gigs, if I have engagement, it's cool. I'm happy to play 3 hours and play covers and stuff. Engagement is great. So it's like, oh, can you play this? I'm like, look it up on my phone real fast and then just like wing it. And they love it.
Yeah.
And so there's been so many amazing insights about music I've gained through that. Like people seem to go crazy. They like the most what I know the least. They're like, oh yeah, that's rad. Yeah. I'm like, well, I've kind of heard it before and I just wing it and they love it, And then sometimes too, you set up, you start playing, no one's clapping, and you're like, well, fuck, right? And then, people are like leaving and they stop by and they give you a big tip and they're like, that was really great, man. You're the reason we stuck around. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh.
Yeah.
So it's taught me like,
God.
don't show up to the mic needing so much approval, so much acceptance. Show up and just shine. Like, do what you if anything, that's what's going to speak and grab people, speak to them and grab them.
Oh, and that speaks to exactly what I talk about all the time with, like, you can never judge a performance by what you're doing on stage, because it's like, you don't know what it really sounds like to the audience. And, and that just adds to that conversation of like the setting you're in. You don't know what's really going on. They could be loving it, but they're just out to have dinner or whatever. And then not until the end, when you actually do get some feedback, that you go, oh, okay, or something,
Right, because some are like, we're going to go out to dinner, and look, there's music. Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah.
And they appreciate it, and some are walking by and they're like, is that music? Let's eat here.
Yeah.
And it's like, you just have to stay open and I guess not be so sensitive.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's us artists struggle with sometimes. Okay, so the second part of that is Seattle. So you spent 3 years in Seattle.
Yeah.
What did your impressions based on your 3 years of the Seattle music scene? Like, what did you come away with? What struck you different than somewhere you'd been before? Or what struck you the same, or kind of?
Well, first of all, I mean, my friends that know how much I'm not into sports are going to love me saying go Hawks.
Yeah.
I see that back there.
Yeah.
They got that hanging.
Yep.
And, as another aside, like, that was so cool to live there when they won their first Super Bowl. I'm not into sports balls or whatever, sports ball stuff. But, like, the energy of the city was just, like, amazing. Like, just, I guess, on a sociological level.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I lived there for 3 years, from I think about 2011 to 2014-ish. And probably the 6 years prior to that, I would visit 2 to 3 times a year and was collaborating with a few people, but mostly a good friend from college, Benjamin Dorr. And so I had done some stuff with him on his albums, producing him and co-writing, and finally decided to move up there. I think, the scene was starting to reemerge with like Fleet Foxes and Noah Gunderson and Alan Stone and The Head and the Heart. And so on one of my visits, I actually met John from The Head and the Heart. He had just moved there. And we had a mutual friend, and he showed me a demo of his stuff. And I was like, oh, it's cool. Yeah, it just sounds like, Yeah. And then like a year later, they're freaking hustling, working it, and they were blowing up. And so I kind of stepped right into this like scene that had just like blown up. And it all happened in Ballard, part of town, at the Connor Byrne.
Yep.
And the open mic there. And so my first night in town, May 31st, was an open mic. And on that night, I met probably like 75% of all the artists I would ever know in that 3 year time, all in one area, because it was just so happening. And then I kind of did a little bit of my thing, but joined a group with Benjamin called St. Paul Devance. And that group did really well. Like, we were on top 10 KXP for 7 weeks straight.
Cool.
Yeah, and it was like a lovely success. And I think gradually I began to feel like, man, I came up here to work on my own stuff, and here I am again serving other people.
Sure.
And so my time up there was defined really by a lot of self-discovery. And a lot of standing up for myself. So while I was up there, I noticed that scene at that time was really defined by this, Head and the Heart sound, this kind of indie Americana, 3 chords,
Mm-hmm.
and tambourines and breakdowns and foot stomps and stuff.
Sure.
And admittedly, I even participated in some of that. But there was strongly that aspect, and then there was a really cool hip hop scene.
Mm-hmm.
There is still.
Yeah.
And then there's some like still kind of grungy alternative, almost kind of acid psychedelic
Mm-hmm.
stuff,
Yeah.
which actually I heard a lot in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was some blue-eyed soul,
Mm-hmm.
white guys,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just that happened to have a amazing soulful voice. Bands like Pickwick
Mm-hmm.
and Alan Stone, and then there was a lot of jazz, straight ahead jazz, and even kind of funk
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and those were really all the 4 or 5 genres I was mostly aware of, and that
Yeah.
seemed to define the scene mostly for me.
Yeah, yeah. No, that. I mean, that resonates still. I mean, even today, it's still like the way I describe it with Seattle is like there's like I think world class musicians and caliber in pretty much every genre you want.
Oh yeah,
You know, and it's just kind of it's intense how much music is going down in Seattle.
right.
It's,
Even the classical music scene
Yeah.
too. I mean, I don't mean to leave that
Yeah.
out, but that's really thriving up there too. Yeah, and all the players seem just to be such freaking badasses. Like some of the best players I've ever played with.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's intense. Yeah, cool. That's a cool like that's cool. Paints a picture
Yeah.
of like a moment in time kind of thing
Yeah.
of the 2 different scenes and what's going on.
Yeah. And it's just so interesting too, like how you're received in different places, you know? Same music, different scene. And honestly, a place I felt like most received was actually in LA, oddly enough.
Yeah.
In that big giant fishbowl. You
Well,
know?
we could talk about that at some other time. 'Cause
Yeah.
I will have to have. There's obviously. I mean, I've in the sense that there's just lots we can investigate
Totally.
with Justin Froese
Yeah.
and what you've been involved with. One thing, we're getting close to the end. I mean, we're
Cool.
like 5 minutes left.
Cool.
One of the questions I like to ask is basically just why do you play music? You know, it's just kind of like, what is it? You can throw a little bit of backstory in here if you want, or you can throw a little bit of just whatever it is. How do you respond? Like when I ask the question, why do you play music? It's like, what's the response that your body is telling you to answer with? You know, it's like,
Yeah. I play music because it makes me feel,
yeah,
and it makes other people feel. And I think as a human, we struggle with feelings. And so when you see someone up there on stage just feeling it and pouring everything in there, and it's moving you, I mean, one theory I have of why it moves you so much is because you too want to feel that much. You want to express that much, and hear someone doing it, and it resonates so much that you just sympathetically join them. And so in some way through that, it's this great uniter also of people. And I think, music is just like, I'll just say healing in a way, even though that deserves some definition. It lets people feel things and in that way sort of process them, you know, and evolve emotionally. It could also keep you stuck emotionally. Keep listening to that same track, right? I don't know. But yeah, I think too I play music because it was there so early on and so natural for me and such an outlet. And I don't know, it's almost magical like everything in this existence is vibration, you know, and music is this organization of vibrations that we have tremendous meaning attached to it. And I'm so fascinated by like Alzheimer's patients that can't move or talk or anything, and then you put on music they know and they come to life. Music gets preserved and stored in the mind like nothing else. And so it's like, I think one of the most important like containers for the story of being a human.
Awesome. Well, there's definitely more questions. So like I just said, like we'll have to save it for another time. We'll have to do another round of this down the line and just check in and stuff.
Totally.
But we do have to close it out with another song. So what do you think?
I think a fun one would actually be Assalaam Alaykum.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you how to spell that. I'll show you.
That's all right. I just spell phonetically in my book and then go back later.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me a little bit about the song.
It's based on an experience of traveling in Spain and meeting a gentleman and kind of, you know, me having a rookie moment traveling and sort of giving him some money for some things I won't say. Love you, Mom. And just getting swindled but essentially the universal part of it is someone like doing you wrong and you having a reaction to that, an emotional reaction, and then, you know, you can decide, do you want to stay in that or let go of that and make peace with them, like no matter what. Like, and that's for them, maybe, if you see them and they experience that from you, but it's really just for you. You know, it's like, fuck, I don't want to just keep moping around this city, you know, and I don't want to hold on to that energy. And so, the song kind of came out of that. So I always say, like, you know, I paid 50 euros for this song. It's an awesome one.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, cool. Assalamu alaikum.
That's right. Good job. Which is Arabic for peace be unto you. It's a greeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's awesome. And all Fireflies. Well, first, let's thank you. Thank you, Justin.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's great getting to know you better.
Yeah, likewise.
I'm looking forward to more to come in the future.
Hell yeah.
All right. Let's leave this. Assalamu alaikum on Fireflies by Justin Froese.
All of the above. Exactly.
Justin Froese. And then, as I like to say, remember to party at the Moon Tower.
By it
All right, we did it. We made it to the end of another version of Word on the Street. Thanks so much for joining once again. Patreon.com/thezim. Do it up $1 or more. Facebook.com/Word on the Street podcast. Share the page. Give it a like. Do all that good stuff. And then iTunes. Find it on iTunes. And if you want to continue the adventure of the podcast, every week I do a video journal on the YouTubes. YouTube.com/thezimvideo. And it's where I talk more about what happened on the podcast, a little behind the scenes, and then a bunch of other stuff that I'm involved with in my musical and artistic journey. So check it out, yo. And I think I forgot to tell you something at the top of this podcast. So I'm going to tell it to you now because I don't think I had it out last week when I did my last podcast. Maybe I did. I don't know. But anyways, I published a new song. It's called The Struggle. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on SoundCloud. It's on our Bandcamp page, thezimarock.bandcamp.com. And it's one of my solo songs that I do as a commitment to myself to keep writing music and whatnot. And now that I can't rehearse with A-Rock every week, I'm writing more music. And how that works is my goal is just to write, record, and publish one song every month. And I've been able to write all the songs. I have 6 songs written. I have 2 songs published. So the first one was No Snow that I told you about a while ago. And then this one is called The Struggle that I finally published because... So what happened, let me break this down just real quick for you. I've talked about this before on my video journals, but I'll break it down for you. My friend Byron Agerhorn offered to produce one of my songs, and I happened to be working on No Snow at the time. So I was like, hey, I got this song. Take a look. He worked on it and gave it back to me, and I was fucking blown away. So I was like, oh my God, I never want to touch my own music again. I want other people to work on it. So now I went on this whole kind of tangent and tirade of like asking all my friends that are musical and that I think would possibly do something like this for me for free because I don't have any money to put toward it. And I've been able to get a bunch of people to help me out. So there are 4 songs out in the world right now just doing something. I don't know. I don't bug them about it because I'm not paying for it, but I've given them to them. I've gotten one song is like basically done, but we're waiting for a bass line to be recorded on it. And that's just waiting for the bass player to have time in their schedule. So there's that. The 3 others, I've only heard from one of the other person, and they've sent me a really rough mix of their idea so far. So I'm like, okay, great. You're working on it. Cool. Thanks. And then, so that was that. And so I was sitting, they were just I was getting kind of anxious about not publishing anything and having written songs and not having them published. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do one. I have this idea. I think I could do it all by myself. And so I did it. It's called The Struggle. And I published it. I went all the way through, wrote it, recorded it, mixed it, mastered it, produced it, everything. Made a video for it. I did every single step of it myself. I do have to give shout outs to, I give shout outs already, but I'll give some more shout outs to TJ Berry, Byron Agerhorn, and Tim Styles, because I sent them the rough takes of it and said, hey, what's missing, what needs, and they all gave me input that I took and applied to my production of it. So that was awesome. So thanks guys for doing that. But check it out if you haven't. It's on youtube.com/thezimvideo. It's up there, and it's also on Bandcamp and SoundCloud, so you can find it. And I'm sure I shared it to the Word on the Street Facebook page, so if you scroll down the page you can find it. Oh, I definitely talked about it last week, because now that I remember, I put the link on last week's. No I didn't, because last week I published the Seattle music scene, Success in the Seattle music scene part 2, another video series I'm working on. So if you want to check those out, go check them out. That's on YouTube as well. Anyway, so The Struggle, check it out. New song I wrote, stoked on it. All right, I think that's it for today. Thanks for joining. If you have any questions for me or want to learn more, there's plenty of ways to do that. I'm all over the internet, YouTube, Facebook, podcasts, how it works. Instagram, Snapchat, all that stuff. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Peace.